Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming this afternoon to this panel, which I know will be a very engaged conversation. I'd like to first bring to stage one of our partners and true hosts of the festival, Counselor Tom Showman, who serves on the Tribal Council of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. For those of you who don't know, the Grand Traverse Band is a political and economic force in the Grand Traverse region. The governing body of a sovereign nation, the Tribal Council controls an annual budget that is estimated to be about 4 times larger than Leelanau County's $13 million annual budget. The Tribal Council also serves as the board of the tribe's Economic Development Corporation, which is the largest single employer in Leelanau County through the Leelanau Sands Casino and other enterprises in Pashabastown. In addition, the tribe is one of the 3 top employers in the Grand Traverse region. We want to thank Tom for coming and for your partnership every year with this festival. Thank you.
I want to say Chimigwech to Tia for that introduction, and want to say welcome to everyone. Say Buju, Tom Showman Dijnakas, Shabtown Dojaba, Cross Village and Dida. We're Three Fires people. We're Odawa, Ojibwe people. Potawatomi is another sister tribe from the Great Lakes region. We're Anishinaabe. We're really honored to be here. We wanted to welcome everybody to say thanks for coming. You know, this is such an important issue when we look at the water. Our people have always been water people. The Great Lakes were our highways. They gave us sustenance through the whitefish and the trout. They were the basis of our economy for thousands of generations. And so when the Creator put us here, you know, He entrusted us with taking care of this water, and we take that very seriously. Some of the projects that we're going to talk about today, you know, including the film. But before I talk about that, I just want to say I really want to give a shout out to our Native friends here that have come to show this film and bring awareness to all these issues that we're talking about, because there's a pipeline, there's a 64-year pipeline going through the Straits of Mackinac. And it's not a new pipeline, it's a 64-year-old pipeline. And they've made millions and millions of dollars off that. And, you know, it's endangering our Great Lakes. And so we want to talk a little bit about that, and we want to talk a little bit about Nestle. You know, they want to increase water at their bottling plant up to 400 gallons a minute. That's over 2 million gallons a year that they want to send out, and you know, we're opposed to those things. We've been working, but on the other hand, we've been doing some good things with the government too. We're part of the largest river restoration project in North America. We're removing our second dam in a 4-dam system. We'll be removing 3 of the dams and redoing the other dam, because when you look at the Great Lakes here, people don't realize that all the changes that have come, you know, from the invasive species. So we have to protect what gets into these streams, but we have to heal these streams too. The dams that we're removing are 100-year-old dams that were hydroelectric dams built at the turn of the 19th century, or 20th century, I'm sorry. But, you know, they were no longer useful, and the local economies couldn't handle getting those dams out of there. So they worked with the tribe to get that those dams removed, and there was some pushback from local landowners, and they looked at those ponds and how important that pond was to them and to their memories. But we had to remind them that that river's been there for thousands of years, and our mother, she knows where that river's supposed to go, and she allowed us to get some electricity by blocking her off a little bit for 100 years, which is just a second in her life. But you know, if we start thinking in those terms, you know, she knows where that water's supposed to go. And since we removed that first dam, our indigenous species of our trout are thriving now, and the water's moving a lot faster, and it's colder the way it's supposed to be. So just a few thoughts I want to say today, and again, on behalf of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, say miigwech. That's thank you for coming, and I really look forward to speaking with everyone today.
Miigwech. Thank you so much, Tom. It really means so much that you're here with us. The second person I'll bring to stage is one of the directors of Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock, which is playing tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the State Theater. This is an extraordinarily beautiful and angering film, and I really encourage you to see it. Myron Dewey is one of the directors of this film. He is the founder and owner of Digital Smoke Signals. He's Nue Numa Paiute Shoshone from the Walker River Paiute tribe. And he is Agai Dakota, trout eaters, and Tomoke Shoshone. He is a professor, filmmaker, editor, digital storyteller, historical trauma trainer, drone operator, and journalist. Digital Smoke Signals' goal is to help bridge the digital divide throughout Indian country and indigenize media through indigenous eyes with cultural core values of culture, reciprocity, respect, and family. Please welcome Myron Dewey. I'm going to bring to the stage another director of Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock. His name is James Spioni, and this is his second time here at the Traverse City Film Festival. Academy Award nominee James Spioni's last film, the whistleblower documentary Silenced, premiered at Tribeca and was nominated for an Emmy Award in 2016. His previous work, Incident in New Baghdad, won Best Documentary Short at Tribeca and earned an Oscar nomination. Please welcome again James Spioni. Okay, good. The third filmmaker from the film Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock, is Douglas Goodfeather. He is the executive producer of Awake, and he comes to Traverse City by way of, he was born and raised at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, and he comes to us from Denver, Colorado. Doug is not only a filmmaker, he runs a nonprofit called Spirit Horse Nations, which focuses on environmental issues, including water and land pollution. He also runs another nonprofit called Dakota Way Healing Center, and their focus is with homelessness, PTSD, suicide, and addictions. Douglas is also an Iraq war vet where he served 2 tours in Iraq. Please welcome Douglas Goodfeather. Our next panelist is Liz Kirkwood, who is another local here from Traverse City. She's the executive director of FLOW, which stands for the Love of Water, a nonprofit based in Traverse City, dedicated to protecting the public waters and ecosystems of the Great Lakes Basin. She's an environmental lawyer with 17 years of experience working on water, sanitation, energy, and environmental governance issues, both nationally and internationally. Please welcome Liz Kirkwood. Thank you, Liz. And last but not least, Kurt Guyette is a co-director along with Kate Levy, of the documentary Here's to Flint, which played at the Traverse City Film Festival and is an extraordinary look at the Flint water crisis. He not only helped make this documentary, he helped expose the wrongdoing and the cover-up that was happening in Flint, knocking on doors, collecting water samples, filing Freedom of Information Act requests. As a 30-year investigative journalist, he really has done much to get to the bottom of this criminal conspiracy. Kurt is the he works for the ACLU currently, and he won the Michigan Journalist of the Year award last year, as well as the Sidney Hillman Prize for Investigative Journalism. Please welcome Kurt Guyette. This is such a distinguished panel. Thank you all. I would love to start with the Awake filmmakers, to speak about what your hopes and dreams are with this film. And if you could tell us a little bit about what you documented there at Standing Rock as well.
Just want to thank a brother here for welcoming us to your home. And it's part about Awake is just that, awakening the consciousness to know, that this is Indian country all the way throughout the United States. That's how we see it. And whenever we go into a new territory, we acknowledge the tribe that is there, so we don't want them to think that we're enacting war or anything like that, that we're coming in a good way. And with Awake, we were able to see that happening with all the allies that were able to witness over 400 tribes come in and support in not just the indigenous issues, but what became a human issue, protecting the water, protecting the sacred sites from desecration. And not only did we already know about this happening, but for allies to see this as what's happened from the last 500 years really hit hard with a lot of people. How many people here already knew what tribe was here? Or who didn't and that live here? So here's where we are educating, and it's important because to acknowledge why we were protecting the land and the water. This film is really showing that we've had this connection here for thousands of years, and this is why we came and stood with the tribe, lived there, -40, filmed in -40, lived in a teepee, a yurt, just huddled, and it was pretty powerful. But one of the questions that came through the camp is there was a lot of anger from allies that were there. There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of embarrassment. There was a lot of hard feelings that they were experiencing right in the front. And being a historical trauma trainer, I travel the country and help our youth from teen suicide, sexual abuse, all the hard things that we've witnessed for the last 500 years. Now I was counseling our allies and explaining to them what they were experiencing and what they were feeling, because a lot of them didn't know where that anger was coming from. And when they were witnessing it, it was just a really good place to heal together, to stand together, and share these stories together, and also these common feelings that we all feel, and to go and eat together, pray together in our own way is beautiful. And allies were coming in with tools that they had, whether it was medical, legal, filmmaking, photography, journalism, anything you can think about was coming in, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. So it's a very beautiful place to stand together and learn about the indigenous people of Europe, which I was really like, wow, we need to bring them forward and help our allies see where they came from the original people, and people from the different parts of their country, from Italy, from Spain, all the different people from around the world that had their language, their medicines. So for anybody to go and see that diversity that was worldwide was pretty amazing. And but just a show of hands, who went there from here? Anybody go there from here? Oh, so this is really new to you guys.
Yeah, and well, on that note, I would love for you, Doug, would you explain to folks who may not know much about what happened at Standing Rock, maybe what is the connection between the pipeline and the water at Standing Rock and the sacred ground there?
Can you hear
What can you summarize what the
Test.
summarize what the what that action was about and what you were resisting?
I bet you chante washte na pe choose up in ha. Wa le wahi ki he le wola kota wahi. I like to say to all of you, from my heart to you, I greet you in a good way, and I come in peace. Well, you know, this movement was a very powerful awake for everything. I guess we shook the giant's cage to wake it up and to make people aware. And, you know, Standing Rock is my home. I was born and raised there, so I have family there. I go home all the time. So it was a really big disruption to the normalities of life, and coming into this and seeing this happening, and where you grew up and the things that you're accustomed to, being potentially or even polluted was it was scary. It was like somebody coming into your house, anybody's home, and just taking what they want and just disrupting everything in your home. And, you know, without no matter what you said. And it was unsettling for a lot of people. But when people started to come and people started to rise up, and the youth and the people and the elderly and all different nations and all people started to come together, we started bringing hope back into everything. I mean, hope came back into the world, and we realized that we can do this everywhere we go. You know, we realized that we need each other as human beings to stand and rise together to fight against injustices, to have filmmakers like this, to bring these things to the forefront, to make people aware. And for these kind of things, you know, brings back, like Myron was saying, these historical traumas that rattles your spirit. And it's sometimes people say, well, just get over it. Would you say that to a combat vet? Just get over it. You know, get over it. You wouldn't say that to a combat vet because he can't get over it. Same thing with historical trauma. You can't get over it. You have to heal from it. You'll never forget it, but you can heal from it and live with it and be okay with it. But it takes time for that. It takes a process for these things to heal. And like Myron said, it was a big healing movement as well, for everything to come and people to come and see from our side, from indigenous eyes, to see by standing beside us, not in front or behind, but side by side. And seeing from indigenous eyes, this is how they feel. This is what they've been going through, and that's why this film. It couldn't be a better name for it. It awakened everybody, and you know, culture is so prominent in the ecosystem of this world, and it's in everything. Culture is in the bees, and the birds, and the trees, and the fish. They all have a pecking order, and they have to do that in order things have to have order. And when you disrupt that order and that process, you disrupt the ecosystem. And same with human beings. We have a vital part in this world, and we must protect it, protect clean water, protect the air. It's not just for us now, but it's important for our children and our children yet to come. And so that's really a big, one of the things that I've seen, and the 7th-generation movement, that now it's our turn to thrust it forward 7 more generations. So when that comes, they will do that, and they will remember us. So I think this was one of the things that awakened everything to remind us, okay, and this is a turning point in life, not just for us, but for all of you and for all of us, because we're all indigenous to this earth, every one of you. And so we have to remember that, and we have to make that powerful to rattle the giant's cage and let them know, you know, we are here, and we're here to stay, and we're here to fight for our children, our children's children, and our future generations. So I hope
That's very powerful. And in fact, there were many victories won. You had the victory of people coming together from all over the country, and then the news camera and the media and independent media exposing what was happening there in Standing Rock. And then initially you had the victory of prevailing on President Obama to stop the pipeline, to stop the finishing of the pipeline, which then later was reversed by President Trump.
Yes.
Can you tell us where things stand right now at Standing Rock?
From my point of view, of my knowledge is that there's a lot of disruption in the pipes that is going through, and so there's a lot of damage to the pipes, and so they have to go back and fix it. I don't know if they're all the way through yet, but I keep hearing that the bits are being broke, and the bits are like 100 to 200,000 a bit, so that's pretty expensive. But I think every one of us has some kind of point on that too. So these things are happening. The leakage of the pipelines, it happens. No matter what you do, it's going to leak. No matter how, it's not if, it's when. And so that's where I know so far what's going on.
James, you brought a clip with you. Could you set up the clip and say something about the project?
Sure. Thank you, Tia, for doing this. Thank you to the festival for inviting us and for saying yes when I suggested we do a whole separate panel on this issue, because I think, as you can probably sense from Myron's and Doug's comments, this is about so much more than just water. This is a real deep cultural moment. I'm non-native from New York. But I'm a human being, and I can empathize. And when I saw Myron's live streams and other live streams, what was going on last summer and into the fall, I just grabbed my camera and went out. I knew I had to be part of it. And Josh Fox, who also worked on the film, was also out there, and Myron had been there. And none of us had a plan to begin with to make this movie. It sort of came together because we were all there doing the work. And then really it was almost the winter by the time Josh gave me a call and said, listen, we should do something together. We should do a collaborative effort. And that's when the idea kind of was conceived to have a film that was really in 3 parts, directed by 3 different directors, Josh, myself, and Myron, and having 3 different points of view, 3 different styles. But crucially, we would be able to work 3 times faster. We'd have 3 directors, 3 editors, and we could get something done within months and have it out and be part of the conversation of what was still happening on the ground. Because this is a very much an activist piece, this movie, a little different than the stuff I've done before. But the things that it does have in common with what I've done before is, I made a movie about the Iraq War, and I made a movie about national security whistleblowers, and these were films concerned with the excesses of power and the militarization of everything, really, post 9/11. And I saw the continuum here. I saw the extreme militarization of domestic police forces brought to bear on these peaceful protesters, and I went to witness that.
I was wondering, Doug, as someone who served this country in the military through 2 tours in Iraq, how did it feel to be there and look at this militarized presence in your home and this extraordinary police confrontation with peaceful protesters?
We weren't even that armed. We weren't even that geared up in Iraq. So to see them geared up that way was overkill. And a lot of times, the lack of education of our law enforcement and public officials and especially that close to a reservation, needs to be cultural sensitivity training, and all that kind of education needs to be implemented in those kind of law enforcements, because if they're going to interact with tribal people, they need to know the cultural sensitivities, they need to know traditions, and understand the things that we do and why we do it. And, you know, we still have our spirituality and very strong and powerful in our ways. And that's why we stood there so prominent. And to see that kind of presence was, for me, it was embarrassing. And because, you know, when you make an oath and you stand by that oath and that creed, and yet you go into combat and you have all these regulations and rules, and you abide by them, and you do your best to do your duty, and come home, and you come home and you come home with the feeling of guilt, of your comrades dying there, coming home and leaving them, leaving that memory there, and trying to go move on in your life. And these things happen to recreate those memories. But so what I take out of that is, okay, I'm going to honor these my comrades, my fallen comrades, in the way that I hold dear to these creeds, that I step forward to the call of duty and to honor them in an honorable way, not to disgrace them the way these guys did. And so it was embarrassing for me to see that kind of militarized police. And I mean, they could barely walk because they were so geared up, and they couldn't even chase us. I mean, if they wanted to, so they'd rather shoot us. And so that was a big overkill for that kind of presence, and to have that kind of equipment there for unarmed people was really surprising to me. And even in combat, we weren't even issued our Kevlars, and I mean our vests till maybe 8 months in zone. So it was very I was just in disbelief. But what really made me feel good and proud was that when the vets came there, the veterans that came there and stood up for the cause and the righteousness of what they believe they served this country for, to their call of duty in their lives, that brought pride back into me.
Wow.
I just wanted to briefly, because I don't know how much people know about the background of Standing Rock and the pipeline. The Dakota Access Pipeline is meant to carry fracked oil from the Bakken Shale, which is in northern North Dakota, through 4 states, including southern North Dakota, where this reservation is, and down to terminus is in Illinois, I think. It's about a 1,000-mile pipeline. Originally, it was going to be routed north of Bismarck, North Dakota, a city about 40 miles to the north of Standing Rock. But the mainly white residents of Bismarck said, you know what, we'd rather not have a pipeline going under the Missouri River right next to us here. And so the company duly moved it south about a mile north of the reservation border, upriver, and to Standing Rock. And so, you know, obviously the idea of race is at play here in the background. The idea that, you know, a city in the colonial society can object and they will be obeyed, but when the, you know, the native population objected, military force was brought to bear. So, but I just wanted to give a little bit of that, you know, basic nuts and bolts information to you, to give you the context of what was happening in this video. So
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I wonder, Kurt, if you can help us understand the connections between the Dakota Access Pipeline and the water crisis that was happening closer to home in Flint, Michigan. The connections between the water protectors of Flint and the water protectors at Standing Rock, and also the greed and the business motives, the corporate decision-making that went into play in both cases.
Well, I'm not sure I could do all that.
Whatever you can manage.
What I can tell you about Flint is, and the reason I was involved, the ACLU of Michigan hired me about 4 years ago to investigate and report on issues related to Michigan's emergency manager law. And for those of you who aren't from Michigan, the state imposed a new law, the most draconian receivership law in the country, that when a city or county or school district is in financial trouble, at risk of becoming insolvent, the state under this law can appoint someone they call an emergency manager who has complete authority over every aspect of the city's governance. And the duly elected city councils and mayors have no authority whatsoever, or they only have whatever authority the emergency manager decides to give them. And the emergency managers have unbelievable power. They can create new laws, they can abolish existing laws, they can terminate collective bargaining agreements, they can sell off city assets. The one thing that the law says that they cannot do is miss a bond payment. So when they're calling out all the big Wall Street people in your clip, I mean, there's certainly one connection, because whatever else the emergency manager does in order to cut costs or running the city, their primary obligation is to make sure that the bond holders get paid no matter what. And in the case of Flint, that no matter what was the lead poisoning of an entire city. Because in order to...
So their primary, it's not for the residents of the city, not for the children who bathe in and drink the water. It's not for the school teachers who teach the children or the garbage collectors. Their primary obligation is for the bondholders. Just want to reinforce that.
Absolutely. It is the one thing that the law spelled out in the law, which I think is explains the whole purpose of the law, is that they cannot miss a bond payment. So wherever else you have to cut, if you have to get rid of the police department, get rid of the police department, but make sure those bond payers get paid. Get rid of the fire department. Houses are going to burn down. Well, too bad, because the bondholders have to get paid. That's the bottom line purpose of the law. And one of their cost-saving measures was to, in order to save maybe $5 million over a couple-year period, they decided to stop buying their water from the Detroit regional system that had been providing clean, safe water for 50 years, and begin using the Flint River while a new pipeline, a new regional pipeline was being built. And they were in such a rush to start saving this money that the water treatment plant was not ready to be put into operation. The guy operating the plant said, if you start treating water, it's going to be over my objections, because we're not ready to do it. And so they went ahead and did it anyhow. Were not prepared. And then when the disastrous results of their actions began to surface, they covered up what was going on. When they started seeing high lead levels, they covered it up and lied about it. When the people started dying from Legionnaire's disease as the result of inadequately treating the water with disinfectant, they covered that up. They covered that up for quite a while. Now people are being charged with involuntary manslaughter for their alleged roles in that. And it gets back into the taking away of democracy, because the normal checks and balances that would exist were removed. Instead of having a separate city government that was doing its role and the state providing oversight, the local elected officials were all gone, so it was all the people on the same team, all the governor's appointees, essentially, that were responsible for making this decision and then responsible for attempting to cover it up. And the way it was exposed was through collaboration. I heard the word collaboration mentioned, and that's another binding factor. In Flint, there was a coalition of people came together to try to get to the truth about what was going on with their water, and then
The ACLU became involved in that effort, and then eventually others became involved in the effort, and eventually the truth came out. But it was a struggle to overcome the lying and cover-ups that were going on there.
Well, as in at Standing Rock, people took it into their own hands, took their protection of their water and their health into their own hands because the powers that be were not caring about that. I do want to point out in Flint that when you say Detroit water, for those of you who are not from Michigan, this was actually water pumping through Detroit, but it was actually originating at the Great Lake Huron, one of the purest bodies of water in the world, one of the largest bodies of water in the world. And the other thing I want to point out is that while Flint, a majority African-American city, made the switch, the surrounding white suburbs of Genesee County stayed on the pure water source and were not, is that right? We're not forced to switch to the Flint River. So it's
Absolutely,
a racialized...
because they still had democracy, and their elected leaders knew they would not be elected leaders very long if they tried to force those people to drink from the Flint River. The residents of Flint didn't have any choice. At one point, the city council voted to return to the Detroit system, and the emergency manager said no. You can't afford to do it, and besides, the water is just fine. So in essence, just shut up and keep drinking this poisoned water because we're going to not let you do anything else. But they fought back, and that's the really inspiring part is how people came together. People that were never in the same room together came together in this coalition and supported each other. They started doing their own research into what was possibly going on. They brought in their own experts to talk about what was going on, and then began doing their own investigations into what was going on. And that aspect of it, as the story is being told by others now, that aspects of it is being lost. The most inspiring part of the story is being lost. They identify a few people as sort of the White Knights that saved everybody. And although the people being credited with that absolutely deserve all the praise and recognition they're getting, it misses the true story about how it was really a coalition of people working together achieved this success of exposing what was going on with them.
Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I lived in Flint from 1964 to 1981, and as a boy growing up there, nobody would ever even swim in the Flint River. There were 3 large factories that were right along that river that flowed chemicals into the river for decades, and that's what happens when somebody from the outside comes in and says, "Hey, look, this is what you need to do," because nobody swam in that river.
Right, it's not swim in it, much less drink from it. And so how did that feel for you as someone who'd come from Flint, who'd lived in Flint? You were up here during the crisis. What was that like for you to witness that from afar?
Well, it was really unbelievable. Flint was a real prosperous town at one time. When General Motors left town, they took the tax base, and you could see everything. You could see how it all unfolded, and it was a real violent place when I left. Because people had built their relationships on a certain income level, and at that time minimum wage was $3 an hour, and 2 people working 2 jobs couldn't earn the same as 1 person working 1 job, and so people got real violent and didn't know what to do, and people left town, and the city was decimated. And sometimes when I go back and go through my own neighborhood and see that, it's real sad. It's real sad to see. But when you look at the decisions that were made, when you put money over people, and then everything's backwards. When I think I'm always reminded, the elders always say nothing happens by circumstance. The Creator has a real plan, and when we were sitting here, thinking about everything that people were speaking about, and so grateful to have these people come to our area and speak about these important things, because you know, when I watched that film, it choked me up because we went to Standing Rock, and you could feel the energy, you know, and people don't, as we go through this life and we get farther and farther away from nature, we lose some of that, and you could feel it as soon as we went there and we danced our flag in and did that tried to do that in the best way that we could. You could just feel that, and we danced around that fireplace and put our sema down and you know, thank for that, for being there and trying to help the people the best way that we could. Those simple things mean so much, and we lose that sometimes, I think. But so then when you're watching that and you're thinking about people doing that to other people, why are they doing that, you know? And you think about how they infiltrated people into the camp and to cause disruption, to so that they could have that kind of presence to justify those means. It's real sad. And when he talked about, I was really happy when they said, "Who knows the local tribe?" and everybody raised their hand. But you know, I do remember a time when that wasn't the case, you know, before we had casino and before we had all these jobs, and you know, we work really hard to be good neighbors here. We have some of the best benefit packages for our employees and try to treat the people good, and share. You know, we spend our money locally and those type of things. And when we all come together like this, it's better for all of us, you know, and so I want to say a few things and appreciate everybody again.
That was beautiful. That was, Liz, can you talk about the work that you're doing in the Traverse area? And I actually want a show of hands. How many people in this audience are from Traverse City? Okay, so.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you and express my gratitude for being part of such an extraordinary panel, because I think the synergy here is extraordinary about, and it's a movement that I really credit Standing Rock to, with the Water Protectors movement. Here we sit in 20% of the world's fresh surface water. Michigan has 4 of the 5 Great Lakes around us, and what I feel very deep connections with Flint, with the work that we've done at Nestle that I'll talk about a little bit. I feel very deep connections with all of you, Tom and many folks, Desmond Berry, Holly Bird, others at Grand Traverse Band. We are very close partners working to decommission the 64-year-old Enbridge Line 5 pipeline that is these are twin open water pipelines that are in the open waters of the Great Lakes. And it's you know, as you say, Kurt, it is about collaboration, and the intrinsic value of water is you know, cannot be monetized. It is this life-giving, life-sustaining force that connects all of us. And you know, so the idea that water could be privatized and commodified and shipped outside of the basin in plastic bottles is a proposition that we are fighting against. It's very difficult. We live in this consumeristic society where we want convenience. You know, thank you, Traverse City Film Festival, for having compostable water containers.
We also charge $3 for the water to discourage, yes, the bottles. Yeah.
Yes, I noticed that.
We put that money into the recycling. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. One thing I'll just say about, well, with Line 5, I'll just say 2 quick things. Line 5, as many of you know here living in Traverse City, so many incredible partners, NEMIAC's here, Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation, and others. But with Line 5, it's a 645-mile pipeline that's primarily transporting Canadian oil through the Great Lakes, going back to Canada, using the Great Lakes as this high-risk shortcut. There are what really tethers the work that we do, and also with the tribes, is that these waters of the Great Lakes are publicly held by the state in trust in perpetuity for our generations, but also for the generations to come. And the same principle for the sovereign nations and the 5 federally protected tribes in the Straits, where their whitefish spawning grounds are, is what unites us, because we all are working to ensure that these waters are protected through this multi-generational stewardship principle. And that is, it's just been incredibly powerful. And then I'll just say one more thing about Nestle. And that's how we have been connecting so much with the folks in Detroit and also in Flint. And in April, as Tom mentioned, there was a hearing for Nestle to remove 400 gallons per minute of water out of the wetlands. And Jim Olson, who is our founder, he represented the Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation for 9 years and demonstrated with the scientific experts that taking that much water out of an ecosystem in the Muskegon River watershed would literally dry up these headwater streams. And so it was this, I mean, it was like deja vu, 20 miles away, same set of facts, same ecosystem, same amount of water they wanted to take out. And, you know, thanks to Garrett Ellison at Michigan, at MLive, he called us up, you know, a couple days before the comment, said, did you guys know about this? We said, no. And because of the expert work of Dave Heineman and Dr. Ludington, we were able, and Jim Olson, legal work, we put together a very strong legal and technical case to say that this is not a permit that the state of Michigan can authorize. And, you know, 10 years ago, that's what it was about. It was just about the local impacts to those headwaters. But Michiganders understood, and they made the connections with the Nestle application. And, you know, of the, 400 people who made public comments that night, you know, almost every single person spoke about the inequity of Nestle taking water out for $200 a year. Meanwhile, people in Flint and Detroit are paying $200 a month.
The highest rates in the country. And isn't there a connection between the Nestle Corporation and the Snyder administration? Am I making that up? What, isn't the wife of one of the members of the Snyder administration a spokesperson for Nestle, Kurt?
His former chief of staff, Dennis Muchmore.
Yeah.
Dennis Muchmore's wife had a role, an official corporate role at Nestle.
Right, yes. Right, that's
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but
yes,
I think it's
no,
important to know.
I wasn't sure if you meant the governor
can I make a
or his
comment?
wife, but it was, yeah, the chief of staff.
Chief of staff, yes. James?
You know, it's not a conspiracy. No, it's just the way things work. Let's I mean, well, oh,
I
yeah,
agree.
I mean, I think so.
we already,
But I think,
we already
I mean, so let's,
we already see that happen, and we're also left out of the discussion that it is not the highest rate of water because we've already witnessed the water gone from us. We're just left out of the equation because you're so used to not including the indigenous people because of the genocide of this country is built off of the flag. And we see it completely different, so it's better to leave us out of the discussion all the time. The discussion is every single state you go around the country. If you're going to look at the Comstock Lode, the Black Hills, come all the way across here, Flint, every single state you go to, the indigenous people have been in constant defense and are completely left out of that scenario. And when we look at Standing Rock, that was broken treaty land that they went through and desecrated the land. They jumped ahead 20 miles, September 3rd. This is something that we've been witnessing for the last 500 years, but you got to witness it, and you're going to see it tomorrow. This is happening now. And so whenever you guys want to know what happened to the issue of the land or anything like that, we've been connected to the land through our songs, our ceremonies, and our way of life. And when that's gone, our life changes, our songs, our patterns, our ecosystem, and our children change. So when we, just being here in our existence is our resistance. Because for us, we do remember that time where we couldn't practice songs and ceremonies and speak our language for these reasons. And that Standing Rock was a sustainable community where there was no homelessness, there was no hunger, we're fully off-grid. And if the camp would have stayed there until now, it would have been fully into food sovereignty. Traditional foods would have been coming in from around the country with seeds and different tribes' medicines. As we've seen there, it looked like Harry Potter when you walk into that yurt and it was medicines from different tribes. That was the beauty that we got to share together, what we can do together, and we weren't taxed from it. There was no outside state or tribal encroachment on that area. It was one of the first organic times I felt like, wow, this is very powerful, and it was something to protect and something to be seen if you guys are ever to go to one of those camps and just experience what that feels like to be having our elders being taken care of. And most of you, I see a lot of elders out here, to know that there was a young person assigned to make sure you had wood, that you made it, and you had food, and you were okay, and you're part of the prayer, and you made it up to and back to your place where you were staying and that you were cared for. That was the beauty of it, is a lot of our non-native allies got to know what it feels like when our elders are treated and taken care of in that community. That's what we're missing. And what we've seen was individual wealth, which is the Dakota Access Pipeline. That was the individual, that spirit has been taken out. But if you're not from this area and you're not from this land, it's easier just to pick up and move. Easy. You don't really have a tie to that, but we have that spiritual tie, that spiritual component to the land, to those medicines, to the harvesting. And a lot of you, if you're farmers, you have that spiritual component as well, because you know what it feels like to harvest your own food. Or gardeners, you know what it feels like to take care and get connected. Or even some of you guys that have pet plants. Who's got a pet plant? You know, that is that connection and that spirituality with that water.
And it's so wonderful to hear that your core values were part of your community building and the resistance, encampment, and that's pretty cool. I want to just come back to one other connection between, I think, Standing Rock and Flint and Traverse City, is the role that fracking plays. I don't know too much about fracking, but I do know you were mentioning that the oil was coming down, was fracked oil.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of leases up for sale in this area for the purpose potentially down the line of fracking, and there's some suspicions, and Kurt, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, that part of the reason why there was an interest in building the private additional pipeline from Lake Huron to Genesee County was to serve the region with untreated water for fracking purposes, because fracking is very water intensive, and they want to use untreated water because it's cheaper than treated water. Am I right about that?
Well, I mean, that's certainly one of the suspicions, and the reason that Flint was needed to participate was their money was needed to make the pipeline the largest pipeline diameter possible to get the maximum amount of water through it. If it is for fracking, like you say, tremendous amounts of water are needed to do that. I also, another commonality is the word resistance that we're hearing here. And in Detroit, I think by the time this summer is over, they will have shut off the water to 80,000 homes since 2013. And that, again, we're in the heart of the largest supply of fresh surface water in the world. Water should be inexpensive here, but commonality between Detroit and Flint is because of the high rates of poverty, because of the high population loss, because of the loss of the auto industry jobs. The money is just not there to pay for the aging, collapsing infrastructure. And so they keep, because the federal government since the 1970s has cut back by about 75% the amount of money that it gives to pay for infrastructure projects, it's now all being put on the backs of the ratepayers, and the ratepayers are increasingly unable to pay the increasing costs that are being demanded of it. So if they don't pay their bills, then that gets attached to their property taxes, and they lose their homes because they can't pay their water bills, or their water gets shut off and their home is condemned, which then allows the state child protective services to take away people's children because they're not allowed to live in a condemned home. So these are all ramifications of again, the austerity that's being imposed in order to keep paying bond payers, because one of the problems in Detroit is $1 million or $1 billion in debt that's connected with these crooked interest rate swaps that the city got roped into, and what was left untouched in the bankruptcy because it was secured debt. And so even though the Detroit bankruptcy was largely done on the backs of retirees, again, the bondholders were protected, and the water department debt was not touched at all in the bankruptcy.
And so take away people's ability to drink clean water, poison their water, and then they don't pay for their water because it's poison, and then you can foreclose on their house because they haven't paid for their water, and then you can take away their children because of they're not living in hygienic circumstances. And I think the indigenous population in this country knows well the legacy of seizing people's children, you know, by the state seizing people's children. I wanted to open up the discussion to the audience, but before that, could we show a clip from Here's to Flint?
Yeah, so one of the things, and this is something that we did, as we went along, we would release short, 3, 4, 5-minute pieces that eventually became part of Here's to Flint. But one of the things that happened was that one of these emergency managers made the decision to use the river. Another emergency manager carried it out. But when it became apparent what a disaster that decision was, they began trying to avoid responsibility and culpability for that decision by lying. What they said was that we had this contract with Detroit. They terminated that contract and said, go find your water someplace else. And although the contract was truly terminated, Detroit wanted to keep selling water to Flint while the pipeline was being built. And they rejected that. It's basically, we think it's cheaper to use the river, so we're going to cut off from you and start using the river. But they kept lying over and over and over again as the problems became apparent, saying, oh no, we didn't have any choice in this. We had to use the river. We didn't have any choice because Detroit kicked us off. And so one of the things that we wanted to do early on was try to drive a stake through the heart of that lie, which is, I think this clip shows.
Okay, let's show the clip. Thanks.
I love that one. Kurt and I worked hard on that one. And this is us sort of experimenting with narration.
This is you narrating?
Yeah, that's me narrating. And the ACLU wanted us to sort of work with sort of, instead of text narration. I like text narration because it's stark. It makes you have to read, and then you can go on to continue watching. But this was an experiment with sort of moving picture and narration. And I think it does a good job because you also have to read. And we kept running up against this lie. Oh, well, they kicked us off the system, and you'll see the video of Jerry Ambrose saying the same thing. They kicked us off. They kicked us off. Well, why would Detroit kick you off? They need the revenue, So we have footage of Sue McCormick saying, you're welcome, to come back on. It's not great footage, so we didn't use it. It's one of those, sort of citizen footage that just, they weren't at the right angle and you can't tell who's talking. But we did have this letter. And so, we made these graphics. I just basically, literally ripped it and then underlined it and scanned it in and then, animated it. So, we're saying, like, why did they keep telling the same lie, right? Why are they lying? Ambrose is telling this lie. The governor's spokesperson tells that lie. It's a lie. Like, it's not a misstep in communication. It's, Detroit forced us off their system is a lie. So then we, explain, like, how, they've been able to get away with that lie. It was sort of a technicality, but Detroit kept trying to negotiate a deal to provide water for Flint. Early's the one who rejected all offers from Detroit. He wanted to save money.
I'm sorry, that was actually an interview with the co-director, Kate Levy, talking about that particular part of it, but so you get a little idea of what was going on.
Very powerful. At this point, I know a lot of folks out here have some questions. Did you want to say something else, James?
Yeah, because there's a point I was going to make before, and I wasn't, I agree with this gentleman here when he says it's a conspiracy. The only problem I have with the word conspiracy is I think we all picture like 5 people in a room somewhere, and it's this one local thing, and I guess I just wanted to open it up to a more global idea here. And it's a system that we have, and we have to name it, and it's called capitalism. And you can see how money is at the root of all these stories we've been talking about here. A military comes down to protect a profit stream, a stream of oil for a private company. Okay, Nestle trying to exploit the waters of the Great Lakes area for profit, in Flint trying to make sure those bondholders got their pay. We have a system that prioritizes money and profit for an ever-shrinking number of people over the health and welfare of everyone else. That's the system we have. So when I see the footage in my film, that clash on the bridge, to me that's a clash of values, of civilizations, really. And what we're looking at, and the reason water is now the intersectional issue, I think, of the 21st century, is because it brings that right into relief. What do you hear people in that clip saying in my section of the film? Water is life. Water is this life-sustaining substance. And on the other side of that, you have no. The earth is just a vessel that holds crap that we can dig out of it and sell and make money, whether it's oil or whether it's water itself, or whether it's using water and vast amounts of it to get to the natural gas. So that's what we're looking at here, big picture. And I think we have to name that, because it's not a conspiracy, it's the system that we all live under. And why I'm honored to sit here with my indigenous brothers and sisters is because they're telling us there's this other value system, and they've had it all along. And it's a choice for the rest of us to really actively start to think about and to make, what are our priorities?
And I think I learned my new favorite word today, earlier, off of what you're saying, James. What the capitalist system tries to do is monetize, but my new favorite word is indigenize. And I think that's a very powerful concept that I'm going to learn a bit more about.
Can I just say one thing before?
Yes.
Which is the importance of film in bringing the truth about what's going on to bigger audiences is such an effective medium, and it's such a visceral connection that is made, like through just watching that incredible clip that you showed. And what an important part of the resistance, the film aspect of it is. And in terms of us, it wasn't just us that was doing it. A lot of our here's to Flint, is footage that people shot on their iPhones, on their phones at public meetings, capturing the stuff, and then they shared that with us, and we were able to put it together with other things and put it out. But again, that the collaboration that went into it was significant, and then the power of the final product is, I think, a very, very significant part of the resistance that's ongoing.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question over here. Yes.
I want to just add a couple little things. Peggy Case, Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. Liz mentioned the issue of privatization, and I think you may have mentioned it in relation to Flint as well. And I just want people to know that that's a big part of what's still going on in Flint, and the people of Flint are now being attacked by the state of Michigan in order to make sure those bondholders get paid, who finance the KWA, the private pipeline, which now Flint is apparently not going to use. But part of the deal that they're trying to make with Flint is they're trying to force them into a 30-year contract with no rate program in line with it, and they're trying to make them pay $7 million a year on top of it to go to those bondholders for the private pipeline. It's a ridiculous deal, and the city council said no, they didn't want it. And so what happens is the state of Michigan is now suing Flint for not going along with this ridiculous deal. So,
And meanwhile, the water is still poison in the city of Flint.
Right.
And those lead pipes haven't been replaced, and the water coming out of the tap remains poisoned.
Well, and not only that, is that they're not testing for other things besides lead and copper. There's other metals that are poisoning people, and there's bacteria from the filters that the state is providing. But the issue of privatization is really huge, and it needs to be looked at for not only Flint, but Detroit and the rest of the state, because the global move to privatize water is affecting all of us. And one more little piece, you ask about fracking. And I just want people to be aware that the piece about fracking that's affecting us in Michigan, even more than the actual drilling right now, is the injection wells, where they're bringing frack waste from Pennsylvania into Michigan to store in our lovely little basin. We have a piece of literature out on the table if you're interested in that. But that's going to seriously affect our water if we allow that kind of thing to continue.
Well, beyond reading the piece of literature, what actually can people do to stop this in the local area, Liz?
I'm sorry, well,
In addition to reading about what she's describing, if people were to do one thing when they leave this room locally, what would you recommend they do?
there's so many things. Well,
Okay, two.
Okay, well, August 4th, next Friday, your comments are deeply needed because you are voting citizens who should speak out about the Line 5 pipeline specifically, and let the state government know that the only reasonable alternative is to decommission a pipeline that Michigan doesn't need. So that's the first thing. And you go to oilandwaterdon'tmix.org website, and you may also hear some radio announcements on that. So that's the one thing. I just wanted to mention, to add on to what Peggy is talking about, is the current administration, as you're well aware of, is really grabbing on this infrastructure issue. It's this really sexy bipartisan issue. Wow, here's something maybe we can agree on. But lurking behind it all is the privatization end of it. And with many water systems, as you know, across this country that are starting to fail, in the next 35 years, we're talking about $1 trillion reinvestment. And this is the time to be vigilant and to be aware about where your water comes from, how it's funded, and to make sure that when your local governments are thinking about privatizing the system, that it doesn't happen, because the number one effect of private water systems is that the ratepayers pay for it, just as Kurt was explaining. And so this is where we need to be on the forefront and be absolutely awake.
We're running a little late, but I think we have a number of questions. I just ask that you keep your questions brief, and the panelists in turn will keep their answers brief. Yes, sir.
My concern is that, again, we see a population without political or economic power being victimized and being portrayed as evil. We've seen this before with the anti-war movement. The hippie drug takers were shot down at Kent State. We saw it with civil rights when the African Americans demanded their rights and were shot down in the southern states. And we even saw it in Michigan in the 30s when they tried to unionize the auto plants and Henry Ford machine gun union workers. So it's not just the current minority that's being attacked, it's the current people without power are being attacked. It's internal colonialism.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement.
I think
Over
it's wrong
here
to
in
say
the-
that
in the-
people don't have the power. You know, I think we're showing that there's a power in getting your story out. But, you know, in Flint, the odds were all completely against those residents, and they succeeded in getting the truth out, and the truth led to change. It's not fixed yet, but to say that they don't have the power, I think, is wrong and falls into the trap that the other forces would like people to believe.
Gentleman in the middle.
Thank you for being here and taking my question. I'd just like to say thank you for being here and taking my question. The corporations that do this have no regulations or really suffrage for the devastation and killing of both the oceans, the lakes, and the people. Enbridge had a spill in Kalamazoo, and that's never mentioned. And also Exxon and BP made money off those spills. It's horrendous. There's no regulations or accountability. I don't know why.
Is that your question? Why? Tom?
Well, just to add to that, because Enbridge does own the company that does their own cleanup, and they made estimates anywhere from 5 to 10 times as much money cleaning up that, because Kalamazoo was the largest inland spill in the nation's history.
Wow. Wow. Where are we with our mic? Over in the back. Yes.
Hi, I want to make a comment about Line 5 that actually goes through the Straits of Mackinac. That's the only part of underwater piping that they have. It runs about 200 miles across the length of the Upper Peninsula, most of it right along the shore of Lake Michigan, and that is also very unstable and exposed. So the other problem, I live.
Do you have a question for the panel?
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that there are other problems, that there are 200 townships in the Upper Peninsula that get all of their revenue, most of it, from the property taxes that Enbridge pays on that line. So I hate the line, but this is a very complicated subject. Thank you.
There's microphones circulating in the audience, so if you have your hands raised, we will try to get to you. Here we are on the aisle.
One comment, the image in your clip of my military spraying water on people as icicles formed on barbed wire is not one I will soon forget. Thank you for bringing that to us. But thinking with the reality of the world we live in, is there not a way to approach this problem from the point of view of it costs more money to decimate the environment? Henry Ford, who gunned down his workers, also raised their pay to create a market for his cars. Health insurance of people dying and going costs more. Is there not a way to approach this as a vital resource that will cost more to remediate
Well, I would just point out it doesn't seem to be about saving money. It seems to be about making sure that the money of the taxpayers goes to corporate private interests. And but does anyone want to speak to that, Myron?
Well, you know, it would have never happened if the forefathers' promises of this country would have honored their word and not broke the treaty. They would have never went through the sacred sites. And what we're looking at today is how do we hold ourselves accountable for their promises to the indigenous people when these promises have never been met, and you're expecting them. We're seeing this happen. When it came to Army Corps of Engineers, they weren't supposed to go through, but they did. When they denied the easement, it was just a repeated history. They still came through. They were still working. And so when Dakota Access went through, they're going to fine them, and that's all they're going to get is a fine. So we've learned that the best way to hit non-native people that are rich is through their money, and so is to divest and educate. But when it comes into your area, which is Standing Rock is going to come to you, we witness what they'll do in hiring mercenaries, Tiger Swan that came to the front that are overseas, you know, technology encroachment that happened in the open. 9 different federal agencies, Homeland Security, Border Patrol that was there, ATF, all these different park ranger feds, you know, different agencies from around the country. This is going to come your way, and you may have even family members that did go there. The difference is we weren't just a bunch of Indians. We actually know English very well, educated very well, been colonized and assimilated, and we protected ourselves with the laws, with your laws, with the colonial laws, and also decolonize it in a moment together all at once to say, here's how we're doing it. Here's a solution that we can heal together and keep moving forward because we're in it together no matter what. And it worked when the 550 churches came down and denounced the doctrine of discovery and apologized for the sexual abuse, the rape, the murders. That was heavy. I cried because I'm a historical trauma trainer. That's part of the healing that we don't want to hear, that we need to hear. When the military came in, the 4,500, and apologized for all the way back to the Calvary. These stories are in your families. That's part of the healing. And when you're looking at back to right now, this is part of the problem, is that we already know we're going to live it. When we're all gone, our Mother Earth is going to outlive us. We can't outlive her. And that's what we're seeing here happening. And so by coming back and getting that reconnected, it's going to be hard, but you're going to have to figure out a way to do it. And you're going to have to bring back that spiritual component that's not in there right now. That spiritual component that's not in the EIS that only we have on our own land. And this is what we're seeing. So imagine if we went through the grave sites here just with a dozer in front of you and started digging, and there was nothing you can do because we had our own tribal police to keep you away. This is what's going to happen to you, but it's going to be your own police. It'll be your own relatives that are in the police or military or National Guard. National Guard was there as well. And in the documentary, you're going to see that there was checkpoints. It was set up, and somewhat like martial law coming in. There were different checkpoints all the way around. If you were Native, they would send you all the way around to Highway 6, and you had to go all the way around. I mean, the due process now, 814 people were arrested. So now we're seeing the due process in the political system. This is nothing new for Indigenous people. They start us young in the judicial system, juvenile detentions. They kidnap our children, get them caught up in the foster care. So we all know too well from Indigenous perspective, we were already prepared for this. This was happening. But the difference is the world came and started healing together. The community started healing together. And what you guys are seeing for us, those jurisdictions is what stopped them from coming over. The jurisdiction is that you guys are dealing with. For us, it was never there. And as we're seeing that border, you know, the border right there, that's an imaginary line that really they stop at. So when my drones were getting shot, they would stop on this side of the res, but because no one was there, they were violating those laws, and we documented it. So what you're seeing is that when they did the EIS, they did it this way to Bismarck, all the way to where the non-natives were, and the indigenous people were this way a mile. They didn't do it because they didn't have to because of the jurisdiction that went across. That's the problem we're seeing, is that humanity part, that component's also left out of there. So how do you get them back into that? How do you say, okay, If that's gone, how do we bring it back? Because capitalism is really taking that big Trump card up there. And when the president got right back in, he vetoed and put in the Dakota Access and the Keystone. And they came through that week. So this is what we're seeing right in the front. And hopefully with you guys seeing this documentary and saying, wow, okay, what did we create? What happened here with our laws? And the laws aren't working for us with our tribal governments either. We're trying to go back to the traditional way. Many tribes can't afford that. So there's going to be a reservation near you, and it won't be indigenous people living on it. It'll be you guys. And that's what you're going to have to start to look at as we work together and say it's not working this way.
And
I want to thank everybody on the stage for being at the forefront of the water protectors that is not only benefiting your communities, but this land, Mother Earth, and the entire world. So thank you so much. I would encourage folks to, do we have any time for any more questions, or are we out of, oh, we do. Okay. Are you all good staying on stage for a little bit longer? Sure. Okay.
I just want to
Tom?
make one quick thing. Third weekend in August, that's our Powell weekend. There's some ships coming in, and they're replicas of the Christopher Columbus ships. And, you know, growing up, you hear those stories, 1492 and all that stuff, you know, but you didn't hear about the babies that he killed and the rape and murder that happened. You know, this was not a great man. This was a greedy man that did anything and everything he could to pillage and rape the land and the people, all in the name of, you know, money. That's what he was there for, you know, to get rich. And if that story was true, if people, if they showed the real Christopher Columbus, we wouldn't have that day. People would be ashamed of the things that he did. And so we're, as our tribal nation, we're we're going to peacefully protest that, you know, that coming here, because he didn't do anything good for us. And really, he didn't do anything good for you.
Are you inviting people outside of the nation to join you in the protest?
We are.
Okay, consider that an invitation. Okay. What day is that?
I don't have the exact dates. I think it's the third weekend in August.
Is there a website people can go to learn more, or an email address?
We will be putting it on our website, gtbindians.com.
gtbindians.com. So please, if you're interested in standing in solidarity and protesting, gtbindians.com. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah. First, just to say, we didn't see a clip, but there was an amazing film created by the students at Michigan State on Line 5. And I really hope that will get, it's like a 25-minute film, that it can get on public television in Michigan. And I think the film festival and the participants from Michigan State and environmentalists could work to get that online. But my question is perhaps for James, since you overlap with the Middle East. And that is, I heard at Standing Rock, or I think I read somewhere, that there were private contractor security forces that were hired by by the pipeline company that were, did they collaborate with the police? And and is there any way, and that they had experience in Iraq. They were coming from war countries, and they were turning their experience against nonviolent protesters. Is there any way to hold those people accountable, and are there any laws or any ways to prevent their participation in any future peaceful protests against corporate interests?
Well, I think you're going to have a hard time getting laws passed against that, although the first step is just getting the information out, and I think we're still in that phase. Part of the great service that Myron and others did out there was just to record these guys before they even know who knew who they were. Who are these guys in the unmarked vans and in the black pickup trucks, and who are those guys on the hill surveying us, and they don't have uniforms on that we recognize. But this is part of the whole thing I was talking about the ideology that you're up against. I mean, you know, capitalism and war are inextricably linked, and that idea of we've got to dominate this population to extract the thing that we need from them, that's going on worldwide. That's a global phenomenon, and so you're seeing it. I mean, there's a reason we're rampaging across the Middle East in 7 countries in the last few years, and it's not to get terrorists, I can tell you that, okay? There's a reason Russia is now the big enemy. Russia is an incredibly resource-rich country. Don't think for a moment that the people in charge of things aren't trying to find ways all the time to increase their piece of the pie. So on the small and the macro level, coming back down, or the micro level, to Standing Rock, of course, it made total sense. Let's hire the guys who were mercenaries in Iraq and Afghanistan to come here and tell us what to do about this insurgent population of natives who are trying to stop our pipeline. And I urge you to read the documents that have come out, which are frightening and almost hilarious in the way they describe these peaceful indigenous people trying to protect the water on their own lands as insurgencies, as people who might bomb them. So it's the self-fulfilling sort of ideology. And then, of course, so now we have a reason to have those MRAPs, those mine-resistant vehicles that they brought. They create the reason. So it's all of a piece. You know, this is all the mindset. You know, I think to what Myron was saying about, you know, this is coming to near you. It already has come to rural white colonial communities, and they already are, in fact, modeling some movement protests on Standing Rock. There's a group of Amish in Pennsylvania who are modeling their attempts to stop a pipeline on Standing Rock, and have said so. So, and I just want to say, people want to say, you know, people are asking, what can I do? What can I do? I mean, yes, write your councilman, your congressman. Yes, try these, you know, these democracy methods. But I think if we are serious, we need to go beyond that. We need to start to be part of this movement. You do need to show up at one of these camps. If you can't go and camp for a week, just go and see what's going on at these resistance camps. You know, get to know who your indigenous, you know, tribe is in your area. I mean, the more we can sort of physically put ourselves out there, I think, the more we're starting to live the experience of, you know, really resisting and really trying to find another way, and not just expecting someone in power to do it for us, because, you know, you could wait a long time for someone in power to help you out if there's not a profit motive behind it.
We know what the problem was too. Is they were allowed to operate without a license in the state of North Dakota. So, Tiger Swan, latent services, the securities, and so now they already thought ahead. How do we not get held accountable? That's what's happening right now. So you got to hold them accountable right now and make sure that they're not passing laws. The other laws is trying to mask up. They're trying to have a law down there in certain states. So have your young people be aware. Teach your young people, you know, how to be active and empower them and make them feel good about what they're doing to protect the water and the land, and educate your young people to be able to have the tools to document and to participate. Give them the tools and the diversity of those tools as well, because if you don't, they're going to pick right up where the last generations are thinking. And we've seen open racism in Bismarck completely. There was like no filter. You know, I was experiencing it the most. I went to jail for filming over there, and my charge was stalking, and stalking the Dakota Access mercenaries, which I brought that to the police, that these guys were stalking, and that's why I was documenting them. And I work with at-risk youth. I'm a professor, and I work all over the country, but I also sit with my son in class. And if that charge would have stuck, I would have canceled that. I would have been able to sit with him in class or work with the youth. So they're abusing the judicial system. You got to support those people going to court. Go sit in court with them to let the judge know and the prosecutor that they have support and that you're witnessing what's happening. This is what you can do, because this is what we're doing. But Bismarck is way in the middle of nowhere. And so luckily there's people out there that are supporting. And when I was up there documenting that, it was a beautiful thing to show them that they have support, they're not alone. That's the most important part, is they're not alone. And just continue to educate your circle is the most important thing. Also, the laws are so important here. Learn those laws and make sure you get some young people in there so you don't burn out. So I had a young crew with me and the youth media in there, and just trying to make it, exciting and laughing, and we had a good old time, and making music too, and doing the things that we need to do to protect our Mother Earth and each other, and educating the allies that were coming in. I want them to feel empowered. I want you guys to feel empowered when you go and say, wow, okay, what is it I can do? And it just doesn't fizzle out. Where can I go? Get your 1-minute speech too. That's another one to the youth, because when you start hearing them and they're looking around and they're not paying attention to you, then you got to get it down and share it the way they understand it, through music. And it's not your generation, but I know some of you guys in your generation listened to some controversial music back in the day. So that's how they are now. You're like, oh, they listen to this rap and hip hop. Well, yeah, a lot of back in the day, Elvis and Beatles and Chuck Berry and all those old style music. So that this is just a different generation. And just think of where they're coming from and empower them. If you don't have the tools, bring someone in to empower them, because I don't see any young people in here. And they need to be in here. They need to be a part of this discussion. And they also have to have your youth groups. Get your youth group in here to participate in this film festival and have them learning how to moderate and run a discussion, because I just spoke at Unity, which was 1,500 youth, and they run all the discussions. They run all the sessions. We just kind of aid them. Our generation is just aiding them, and they need help. We're just helpers. And that's really something very powerful we've seen, because Standing Rock was a youth movement. They ran from Standing Rock to DC. And that's how powerful it was. And the women, the keeper of the water, the ones that we're mothers from, we come from that water. Every single one of you guys come from water. And I can't speak on behalf of women, but I've heard some beautiful teachings from women up there. For us, is we still have that matrilineal way in our culture. Now, patrilineal is changing our way of thinking and how we treat our women. And so we had to make sure we understood that. And that's part of the decolonizing. So our women are very powerful, and they were in the front line. And the footage that I have of women getting arrested, some of them did not speak at all the whole time. And they didn't let going in those dog cages when they were arrested and having those numbers printed on them affect them. It made them stronger, because this is what we needed to do. And the ones that was shown in James's part is that there was around 300 that were injured, but they didn't want the satisfaction of Morton County knowing they were hurt. So there was about 175 that wasn't reported at all. So there is a lot of hurt, but there's also a lot of strength that comes with it. So support your youth as much as you possibly can, and give them the teachings that they don't have. Because if they're not getting that diversified, then they're just gonna recreate the wheel. And who controls the media controls the culture, because for indigenous people, everybody thought we lived in teepees from Hollywood, and Standing Rock, it was diversified. And so Hollywood was there, and we were able to educate them, empower them. All the news outlets was there, but still, it was a media blackout. So make sure your youth are in there, teach them how to write, press releases, how to research, and give them the tools. And I think what I hear the youth do is just empower them, because they're always hearing, oh, well, how come I always got to hear about how hard you had it? Or you're so lucky, And that's what kind of pulls them away. So just give them the tools, let them experience it. And, we were fully in compost toilets, too. Yeah, someone was wrapping up the waste. They were in there playing chess. It didn't stink. It was in -40. I was surprised. It was clean. And it was a way that I thought, wow, I can do this. We can do this.
We can do this. Those are wonderful words to end on. Thank you very much, Myron, Tom, James, Doug, Liz, and Kurt for all that you do with your artistry, with the laws, with community building, and for being on this stage sharing some of that with us. And thank you all for coming today. For
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just like to, testing. I just like to remind everybody that we all live together on this earth. We all walk together on this earth. So we must all take care of this earth together. We must learn how to do that together we have to do that together. Because as we sit up here, it took a collaboration of every one of us, as hard work and sacrifice to be here and tell this story. So we must stand together as a people to take care of this earth together. So thank you very much for having us.